like.
Okay, thanks so much, Jonathan, and thank you everybody for being here. This presentation is on a planned research study on the impact of our no cost and low cost schedule designation in Oregon. And we want to know whether it's having an effect on student enrollment behavior. This is a study that I've been hoping that somebody would do and publish on for a long time. And nobody has, so we're doing it. But the reason we're presenting today is that we really hope that others will take this idea, adapt the method, and share more data, really taking a look at the impact of the schedule designations that we're seeing more and more. And here in the US, it's Veterans Day. So hello, veterans and families, and also special hello to future viewers. I have to admit, this is the first Open Ed conference session I've been able to make it to. And so I'm going to be interacting with the conference next week when my schedule permits. So future viewers of the recording, I'm in the same boat as you. So I wanted to introduce our team, not all of whom is here today. The full project team includes Justine Malosh, who's a senior research analyst at Lynn Benton Community College, Tamara Marnell, a librarian at Central Oregon Community College, Emily Wanis, legislative director at the Oregon Student Association, and Michaela Willie Hooper, OER librarian at Lynn Benton Community College. I'm Amy Hoffer, I'm Oregon's OER coordinator, and I'll let my colleagues turn on their microphones and introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Sean McNulty. I'm science faculty at Umpqua Community College.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Landtrip, and I'm interim library coordinator at Umpqua Community College.
Open Oregon Educational Resources is our statewide OER program, and it promotes textbook affordability for community college and university students and facilitates widespread adoption of open, low-cost, high-quality materials. You can find out more about what's going on in Oregon at openoregon.org. And we want to reflect on the history of the places that we're presenting from today. I'm at home in Northeast Portland, and I recognize the Clackamas and Cowlitz tribes, and Jennifer and Shauna both work at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, and they recognize the Cow Creek and Yoncalla tribes. Today in Portland, there's a robust presence of federally recognized tribes, the Grand Ronde, the Seelitz, and Cowlitz, in addition to the Chinook Nation, who's been seeking federal recognition for many years. Portland has an urban Indian community made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing at least 380 tribes, whose varied history and present-day circumstances are impacted by genocide and colonialism. So the three of us want to recognize and acknowledge that injustices led to our use of this land. And I really want to acknowledge and thank the Native Land Map folks, where you can see the image on the slide. It's a terrific resource. And also Portland's Native American Youth and Family Center for helping me learn more about land acknowledgements and for information that helped me write this statement. And I'll give a little bit of background on our schedule designation bill. It's House Bill 2871. It passed in 2015, and it requires the courses in our public community colleges and universities to designate no-cost and low-cost courses in the schedule so that students have that information when they register for classes. And the purpose is to make the cost more transparent so that students can make informed choices when they're registering. And the purpose of the study, of course, is to find out whether they're actually doing that. As I mentioned, the bill passed in 2015, and as of spring 2019, 20 of our 24 institutions had implemented the designation, 2 had partially implemented, and then 2 more implemented and then went on hold. And that's because they changed their student information system or had another software issue. So in terms of compliance and implementation, I think we really have a lot to be proud of in Oregon. And one more point that I want to say before I hand it over is that we're talking about no cost and low cost course materials. The bill doesn't have any requirement about copyright or licensing status. So now I will hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. So the purpose of our research is to discover the effect of the no cost and low cost designations on student enrollment behavior, course completion, and enrollment intensity, which is defined as the number of credits each student is enrolled in for a given term. We also want to find out whether there's a different effect for traditionally underserved populations. The purpose of our research is also to answer questions for faculty, stakeholders at each institution, such as bookstore managers, Oregon's Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and Oregon's legislature. Faculty are curious if their course material choice may have an impact on enrollment, since they may see a financial impact if their course doesn't run or is under-enrolled. Bookstore managers and other stakeholders who have done the work to implement these designations want to know how their efforts have affected students. And Oregon's Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the Oregon Legislature want to know how House Bill 2871 has affected students since it was passed in 2015. We have 3 research questions. Our first question is, does the presence of no cost and low cost schedule designations affect student enrollment behavior? In particular, we want to know whether there is an effect on course enrollment, which is defined as the number of students enrolled on the last day to add or drop. We also want to know whether there is an effect on the course fill rate, which is how quickly the course filled. Our second question is there a significant difference in enrollment intensity in courses with the no cost or low cost schedule designation compared to courses without the designation? We also want to know whether there is an additive effect, specifically whether the number of additional credits students are enrolled in each term increases with enrollment in more no cost or low cost designated courses. Our third question is there a significant difference in course enrollment, course fill rate, or enrollment intensity if the data is disaggregated by part-time versus full-time students, race and ethnicity, Pell Grant eligibility, age, or sex or gender? To gather the data needed to answer these questions, we've made data requests to the offices of institutional research at 15 of Oregon's 17 community colleges and at 6 of Oregon's 7 public universities. We're requesting the data from the institutions that implemented the designation prior to fall 2019. We'll be asking for data for the top 10 transfer courses statewide by enrollment, and we'll ask for data for all sections for each of these courses for all terms since the no cost or low cost schedule designation was implemented at their institution. The top 10 courses statewide by enrollment were courses identified as follows in this table and include the subjects of writing, math, communication, economics, business, and psychology. The data points that we requested should be able to be pulled by the institutional researchers from their institution student information system. We provide specific definitions for each data point, we provided specific definitions for each data point so that we can get back consistent data. Please see our full project description for a detailed list of the data we requested and the definitions. And now I'll turn it over to Shauna.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our actual data questions and how we're going to analyze them. So just as a little recap here, the first question has to do with the enrollment designation. So whether it's no cost, low cost, et cetera, and how it affects enrollment levels and fill rates. So one of the things I want to point out here is when we talk about the cost designations, we actually have 4 groupings for that. We have no cost, we have low cost, And then we have a combined category that has low and no together, because that's how it's listed at some schools. And then the fourth is none, meaning it doesn't have any low or no cost designation. And so when we talk about enrollment levels, what we're talking about is the percent of students in the class compared to the course cap. And so, for example, it's a 38 out of 48 possible students that could have been in that class. And when we talk about fill rates, we're talking for those courses that actually did fill, how long did it take in days from when the course opened during registration? So just to define those variables a little bit more for you. And so in order to analyze these, for example, like, student counts, for example, when we're talking about enrollment, I'm going to use an ANOVA. And instead of using something like a t-test is probably what most people are familiar with. And you can use a t-test when you have 2 sample groups. But since we have 4 groupings for our cost designation, and ANOVA, which is an analysis of variance, is more appropriate. And so we'll use this to look at the means and student counts to see if there's any statistically significant difference between these different groupings, low, no, and combined versus a standard course designation. All right, and then we're going to go on to research question 2. And if you look here, this is whether there is a difference based on enrollment or cost designation status as it concerns the intensity of credits for that student during the term. So are they taking, 9 versus 12 versus 15 credits along with these cost designation courses? And so again, here, we're going to be looking at the means between the credits per student. And so we're going to use analysis of variance because we're keeping the same 4 groupings, no, low, combined, and none for this one. So we'll look at this, mean quarter credits and to see if there's any difference between these groups. And that's whether there's a statistically significant difference between each, right? And then 3 is something where we're going to layer basically over these first 2 studies. And so we're going to disaggregate the data based on the institution, whether the student has part-time or full-time status, their identified race or ethnicity, their Pell Grant eligibility, age, sex, and gender, and to see if there's any statistically significant differences among these groups. Now, this one is a little bit different than the prior 2 analyses because we're dealing with a lot of categorical data. So what I mean by that is it's not a continuous variable. We're putting them into classes and we're giving them basically dummy numbers like male, female, 1, 2, or 0, 1, however you would want to note it. So because this is using categorical rather than continuous data, we're going to use a chi-squared analysis. And so this allows us to basically compare what we see, the structure of the data and what we would expect to see with what's actually observed. So that will allow us to say, whether there are more or less individuals who fall into each of these classes based on these demographic and financial aid categories that we have here. Right? And now we're going to go into our data considerations. So the first thing is going to be our confidentiality statement. And so, of course, these data are going to be de-identified before I go through any analysis to make sure that, the confidentiality of all parties is going to be ensured. And so it won't include student names or their identification numbers. It won't include faculty names or CRNs for the courses. And so when we do the final report, we're going to aggregate this data in order to ensure that there's going to be anonymity for the students, but also for faculty. So per federal guidelines, basically any cell sizes that are fewer than 10, so that means there's, account for something like a gender classification or a ethnic or race classification. If they're less than 10, they will be combined for analysis. The reasoning behind this is if you have fewer than 10 individuals in any category, you could say, hey, that was my class. And I know if there's only one individual, I know it was this person. So you could, potentially look through the data and figure some things out. So anything that's fewer than 10, we're going to aggregate. And so the final report is going to mask things like institution names. They'll get a generic label like college A, college B, and anything that's an identifier will be removed. All right, next for how we're actually going to deal with our data. So we do have to make sure that our data is secure. And so we have already set up a secure Dropbox at Umpqua Community College. Again, that's where I'm based, so that's where I'll be doing the data analysis. And one thing about this Dropbox is once we put a file in there, it's swept away immediately. So even if we have a data breach on our website or on our campus, it's still secure. So all files that are containing identifiable information should be sent to us with a password protected Excel file. We can get that password from you over the phone. And so that way we can keep things a little bit more secure. And next. All right. Of course, this is going to be a very specific study. So I do want to note that this is what we consider a pilot study, since we're going to have a smaller number of institutions and we're going to have, a smaller number of students compared to something that would be a nationwide study. And so please, please, please replicate this study in your state. We would love to see different states get in on this kind of situation, because any kind of conclusions that we can draw basically from this data will be fairly limited. It'll be more Oregon specific and for the type of schools that actually respond to us. So replication is key. Please, if you are interested, feel free to contact us and reach out. And we are looking for feedback on our study design. Oh, you're fine. We are looking for feedback on your study design. So please feel free to give us any feedback that you're thinking about, as you're listening to us both talk. We do have on the next slide there our references that are coming. So here are some nice studies that we've either looked at as an example or that we referred to in some way as we were developing this proposal. And last but not least, or second to last but not least, yeah, this study, like many that most people undertake, when you start it, you realize, oh, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be, or not as simple maybe as I thought it was going to be. And so we started this several months ago. We thought things might progress a little bit faster, but sometimes slow and steady wins the race. And so please, if you have any feedback, let us know. We're going to give you our contact information on the next slide here. And so if you see at the top, we have the Open Oregon website, and we have Amy's contact information as well. At the bottom, we have the UCC website and my contact info, as well as Jennifer's info. So feel free to contact us with anything that you might want to inquire about. We are open to that. And I am going to stop talking for a minute to allow people to give us some feedback or to ask some questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Shauna. And I'll leave the slide up right now and just address a few questions that came up in the chat. So our hypothesis for research question 2, the impact on enrollment intensity, studies in the past have shown that students who take courses that use OER are more likely to enroll in more credits. And we also found a dissertation showing that it was additive. There was an additive effect where students who took even more OER courses enrolled in even more credits. And these are measures that administrators really care about. So we wanted to take a look at that. Dawn has answered Emily's question. This being Oregon, we don't have a standard cap for low cost. I meant to mention that earlier, so thank you for asking. But the average is $40, as in most other places. Cheryl asks, did we have to get IRB approval for this study? Lynn Benton Community College doesn't exactly have a review board, but the research department approved it. And she also asks, and I think this is a Shauna question, for those of us with puny statistical skills, which would be including me, how would we do this? So Shauna, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Oh, yeah. So I actually have, if anyone wants more of an explanation of the things that I've talked about, I have some great articles. Again, I have to, apologize. My background is in anatomy and physiology here. So they come from like cardiology journals, but they're still, or medical journals, but they're still intelligible on basically explaining the difference between a t-test and ANOVA and things like that. And I have a nice article from, I think it's a few years back, that has a nice decision tree for when you would use one test over another. And I think in explaining this, I've forgotten the original question. Would you mind saying that again, Amy?
Oh yeah, let me scroll back.
So statistical skills, and what was after that?
How would we do this?
Oh, how?
And I think actually, like people are sort of saying, how do we replicate? There's a link to the slide deck in the session, but I'll also put a link to what was linked as the giant table, sort of buried in one of the slides, so that you can really see all the data that we're requesting.
But, as far as the stats actually go, there's several different programs out there that you can use to help you do these kinds of statistics. So Excel actually does a lot of these. There is an extension in Excel that you can basically turn on. That's a data analysis extension that will allow you to do an ANOVA. And within the functions for Excel, chi-squares are already present within there. So that's one thing. I also have experience with SPSS, which is a statistical program, and NCSS as well, which make it honestly, and SAS. So it makes it a little bit easier in some of these more fancy programs. But if you just have Excel, you actually do have the statistical power that you need to do a lot of these tests.
Well, and I'll say, I think I'm the only person on this project team that didn't ever take a stats class in graduate school. So I'm really relying on the team members. So to answer the question of like, how do you do this without statistical background? Get help.
Yeah, actually, I'm
And
relying on Shauna as well. So.
Andrew's saying, is it common that the SIS can measure the rate at which a class fills? I think it depends on the SIS. We're expecting that our schools that use Banner, and SIS is Student Information System, the schools that use Banner in Oregon, there is a way to do that that Justine, who's on our team, knows how to do. And if it's an easy thing for her to share the instructions, maybe I'll be able to post that.
And I will say for that point too, I asked for an example from our IR person at UCC, and it really came up as kind of like a graph. It shows basically enrollment as, a graph per day. So you can see when it reaches full enrollment. So if we got something like that, even if it was in graphical form, I can convert that into data that I can use. So if we can do it at UCC, I feel like most schools can do it because I don't think it's a super fancy Banner program. So.
Another Shauna question from Rich. How are you controlling for variables like schedule preferences on which classes tend to fill up first, et cetera?
For schedule preferences on, sorry, it just jumped a little bit there for me.
Oh, sorry about that. So how are you controlling for variables like schedule preferences on which classes tend to fill up first, et cetera?
What do you mean by schedule preference?
I
Sorry, I
think what
have
he
like.
means is like, because we're only asking for data up to fall 2019, like
Yeah.
we don't want the COVID confounding variable, but like 9 a.m. versus 10 a.m. online
Oh
versus in
yeah. Okay. So
person.
we are getting the time and the day for this data as well. So we do have that information as well. So it's also something that we can run as an analysis to see if there's any correlation with, people don't want to take, an econ class at 8 a.m., for example. So that's something we can do. It wasn't one of our main questions, so we don't have it written up into the research question, but we are collecting that data just in case it's a confounding variable. So we can kind of explore that a little bit.
We have 1 minute and I'm scrolling as fast as I can to see these really good questions in the chat. So I think we're not missing any big ones here. Wow, 25 minutes goes really quickly.
Yeah.
And Jeff's saying we're going to get a lot of replication questions. And I really hope that more people will do this. And as Jennifer mentioned, like the audience for this is really like the people, the frontline people that are implementing the schedule designation want to know that it is effective and what kind of impact it's having. Like this is such a real world kind of research to do in terms of being able to communicate with faculty and administrators and bookstore managers and registrars and all the people that are actually involved in the work that goes into the designation. So it looks like we've hit our time. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this session. It's really been wonderful to see the questions in the chat.
Thank you so much. If anyone wants to stay, and if the presenters can stay and wants to stay and unmute themselves and chat, we're welcome to do that. I'm going to turn off the recording now and the session officially will end.